Good afternoon. It is now 1 o'clock, and I'd like to call the January 17th meeting of the UWP Committee to order. I want to welcome everyone back together in person and quickly review some logistics. For those of us in the room today, the closest restrooms are straight out the back door to the left of the reception desk. If you're in this room and haven't already, please be sure to complete the sign-in sheet, which is right outside the door in the hallway. Members of the audience that want to make public comments later on the agenda should fill out a public comment card and hand that card to Terry Dixon or other CMAP staff in the room. This meeting is being broadcast on Zoom and is being recorded. For those online to hear what is being said in the room, please make sure everybody at this table that we're using our microphones. Touch the button on the mic to turn it on and off. The green light indicates that it is on. It also remains a best practice to continue to identify ourselves when making a motion or a second. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless you are called upon to speak. When appropriate in the agenda, I will request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak via the chat box or the raise hand function. Staff monitoring the Zoom will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. With that, let's start today with self-introductions of everyone here at the table. I am Megan Swanson. I am the Senior Metropolitan Planning Manager for the Illinois Department of Transportation. I'm filling in today for Mike Vanderhoff. And to my right, Alex.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Ensign, the Director of Strategic Alignment and Innovation representing CMAP.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jack Malik. I'm a program coordinator with Metra. I'm filling in for Dustin Clark and David Kralik today. So thanks for having me.
Hey, everyone. Scott Hennings. I'm the Assistant Director of Transportation at McHenry County DOT.
Hello, everyone. My name is Buck Doyle. I'm a city planner with Chicago DOT.
Gamma Dobbs with CMAP staff.
Christina Bader with the Chicago Transit Authority.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to try to kick you out, Heather. Sorry.
Regional Transportation Authority.
Thank you. We have the necessary quorum of voting members present, correct, Kama? Excellent. And I'd also like to ask everyone else who's present here in the room to identify themselves. Please state your name and the agency or group that you represent. Let's start with Sarah.
Sarah Stolpe, CMAP.
Terry Dixon, CMAP.
Joe, CMAP.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
Brandon Gaber, IDOT.
Evan Hayes, CMAP.
And Sarah, could you read the Zoom participant list for us, please?
Yes, today we have John Hodsma, Leslie Rauer, Michael Vanderhoof, Ryan Tomto, Sean Connolly, Sydney Kenyon, Todd Schmidt, George from Kane County DOT, and Peter.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourselves, and welcome to our meeting. Our first agenda item is agenda changes and announcements. Staff has no additional announcements and no agenda changes. Does any member of the committee wish to propose any agenda changes? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on to the approval of the minutes. If you go ahead and look at the draft minutes of the October 23rd meeting, does anyone have any additions or corrections? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? And please state your name when you make a motion.
Second, Alex Ensign.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed signify by saying no. Ayes?
Aye.
Any noes? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. We're going to go ahead and go into new business and item 4.01, which is the approval of the 2024 UWP meeting schedule. And I'm going to turn it over to Kama for that.
All right, thank you, Megan. On the screen and in your packet is the proposed meeting schedule for calendar year 2024 with meetings in February, May, August, and November, all at 1 p.m. here at CMAP. Are there any questions or concerns with the schedule?
Anybody? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the 2024 meeting dates?
So moved, Jack Malik.
Thank you, Jack. Is there a second?
Second. Buck Doyle, seconds.
Thank you, Buck. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's take a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye now.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. The motion passes. And now we're gonna move on and get an update from Kama on the development of the 2025 UWP core budget.
All right, I have too many things in front of me, but we're going to do it. All right, so this afternoon, I will briefly review the core proposals, the final budget development, and what's included for each activity in the core. As noted in the memo in your packet, CMAP did receive 6 external core budget proposals from CDOT, the Councils of Mayors, CTA, DuPage County, Metra, and PACE. These proposals totaled just under $6 million and included 34 full-time equivalent personnel across all 6 of the core program categories. Adding CMAP's budget proposal to the external proposals resulted in a total of $34,263,000 and change for 154 full-time equivalents, plus the expenses to complete all of the projects. After reviewing the initial proposals, staff did request clarification and suggested some revisions from a few of the agencies, including the Council of Mayors, CDOT, and CTA. In general, these revisions centered around redistributing personnel and expenses across different activities. Concurrently, staff compiled the requests and compared those to the available funding, which is $34,330,781.45, roughly. As we can see, only $67,000 would be left for the competitive program if all of the core requests were funded as initially requested. Clearly, this doesn't align with our commitment for the competitive program. So if we take an approach of balancing our UWP budget by looking at our commitment of $1 million, it would mean that we would need to reduce our core programming from 34.2 million down to 33.3 million and down even further to 33.2 million if we were to fund all of the competitive requests that were received. We could do this, but I think everybody here would feel a little bit of a pinch. So staff did set out to see if we could achieve some balance by making adjustments to both the core and competitive requests. It turns out for this year, our top ranked competitive proposal is for a project that will actually span at least 3 years and is a funding partnership between the CTA, CMAP, and IDOT. Although CTA's request was for $750,000 in fiscal year 25 to cover their first year's share of the project, after CMAP staff discussed with CTA staff, it was determined that it would be appropriate to spread those requested funds over fiscal years 25 and 26. So doing that brings the entire FY 2025 competitive request down to $563,490, which leaves then $33,767,000 and change for the core. Which we were able to get to with the adjustments that the individual agencies did make. And that brought us to this final core budget that will be presented to the CMAP Board for Information and MPO Policy Committee for approval. Some things in this budget that stand out to me. CMAP does rely heavily on our partners to complete our tip work, which is indicated here in this budget. We also receive significant assistance from CDOT and the councils on the long-range plan development and implementation, along with modest assistance from our other partners. As we've discussed before, PACE's Shared Use Mobility Program is a significant contributor to our congestion management plan implementation, and we also rely on the service boards and councils for assistance with performance monitoring, public participation, and then we do assist the Council of Mayors Planning Liaison Program with their operational costs. I also wanted to throw this slide up here because Dave Tomzik did ask via email how this year's core cycle compares to the past several years. As we can see, most everyone submitted for modest increases, with CTA receiving a slightly larger percentage increase than others, and the counties overall having a significant decrease since only DuPage submitted a request. I think we can expect, in the next cycle that the other counties will have a chance to kind of wrap their heads around the changes to the methodology and would probably submit similar requests to that submitted by DuPage this year. Looking at the core activities, starting with the TIP, here's the budget breakdown by agency. Key deliverables for the TIP, of course, include TIP amendments, the program or resources such as the work type and funding lists, guidance memos that CMAP issues, as well as training conducted by CMAP and attended by every one of our partners. Also includes our regional funding programs like CMAC and TAP and STP, as well as even more. Within the Metropolitan Transportation Plan activity, we see participation from most of our partners with key deliverables, including all of the data analyses and technical reports that contribute to the plan development and implementation. CMAP's technical assistance program is in this activity, as well as our ADA planning, technical assistance, and safety program. And finally, collection of data and reports and analyses of that data that are done by our partners are included in this activity. With a pretty modest budget, CMAP will continue development of an updated congestion management plan. DuPage County also plans to collect data to inform that plan this cycle, and PACE will continue delivering the shared mobility program. In the performance monitoring activity, CMAP and our partners will continue setting performance targets and collecting and analyzing the data to report on the region's ability to achieve those targets. DuPage County is also planning to collect pavement management data, and Metra and PACE will be collecting asset and performance data. I think CTA will as well. It just wasn't listed as a specific deliverable in their submittal. CMAP, CDOT, and the councils and Metra will deliver communications, host meetings and events, maintain websites, and conduct other activities to keep the public informed of and engaged in the region's transportation planning and programming through the public participation activity. And finally, funding is set aside in the core for all of the staff and resources necessary to operate the MPO, including our human resources, finance and admin staff, and the everyday costs of having this office space and completing our work with pens and paper and whatnot. So we also have, of course, the support staff and expenses for the Council of Mayors Planning Liaison Program. So that's kind of a quick overview of the core program. Just a reminder that for our methodology, the core program is set by staff and recommended up to the MPO Policy Committee. But since this is our first cycle using this new methodology, I do want to give some space for questions and discussion if there is any.
Thanks, Gemma. Who has questions or discussion? Does anyone?
Yeah, I had a question. Christina Bader. Is there going to be more information available about CMAP's core activities? I know in past years there's a more lengthy kind of narrative explanation that goes into these memos. And I just wasn't sure if it was coming next month in next month's memo or if you were preparing to do that at all.
Yeah, so all of the narrative will go into the draft UWP document. So that draft is not prepared yet. It'll be prepared and distributed at the next meeting. And then that's what goes to the MPO actually for final approval. The MPO approves not just the budget, but the entire UWP document.
Great. Anyone else?
I wanted to thank you, Cam, for explaining the county's request. I mean, I did want to just draw attention to the much lower request that the counties received this year versus previous years. And I think Cam is exactly right. I think next year you're going to see a much higher request, or the next cycle, once the counties really get a handle on what their needs truly are from a core perspective, and they sort of get prepared to apply next time around. So I think it's just something that we as a committee need to be aware of, that the next time there is going to be a significant larger request from the counties that coming forward. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I think Scott, to that point too, I would expect everybody to probably adjust a little next time, getting used to putting tasks and hours and expenses into these categories. There was a lot of kind of back and forth with folks about maybe that's not the most appropriate place for that staff, and maybe that's too many hours on the tip, but you probably should have some hours on the long range plan or performance monitoring. So I think as we go through the quarterly reporting and invoicing process for this first group of projects, that'll help inform the requests for next year as well.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Christina Bader again. Just following up on Scott's comment about expecting a larger funding request from the counties next year. And the acknowledgement that we weren't able to fund the $1 million of, at least of the competitive program. Is there some concern there that the core request next year will be larger and there's already projects assigned to that competitive program next year, that there's going to be some tension?
I wouldn't call it concern. I think there's a recognition that we may have to, both with CMAP's budget as well as other core proposals, kind of take a harder look and prioritize when those come in. We typically expect the annual mark to go up a little bit. Usually the requests, as we saw in that history slide, kind of go up with it. I think there'll probably be next year more give and take that has to happen than did this year. But again, I think we'll be better informed with kind of more real tracking data from this year's projects as well that should help with that. But yeah, it was, the math worked really well this year, honestly. And in part because of the flexibility with the CTA's competitive project, right? But yeah, I don't expect the math to work out that good again next year. So there will probably be more give and take, but I think we won't be on so compressed of a timeline either, where we should be able to sit down and hash it out a little bit better.
Anyone else? Thank you so much, Kama, and thanks everybody for. Oh,
Are you able to go back to the historical spreadsheet? And I know you said the details haven't been prepared yet, but are you able to talk at all on the details of CMAP's needs and how they've increased quite a bit over the past few years, kind of compared to everyone else who's receiving core funding? Are you able to talk to what's changed that has necessitated that increase over the years?
Yeah, I couldn't speak into too much detail, but this is Alex Ensign with CMAP. I would say largely the increase is due to the influx of IIJA funding that's been responsible for CMAP really increasing its staff. So the number of FTEs have increased significantly since FY 2019 in order to meet the needs of that funding. We also have a much larger portion of grant funding from external grants, like for example, SS4A. It's just the scope of the agency, I would say, has grown a lot over the past 5 years. I could dive into some more budget data to bring to the February meeting, but I would say it's largely due to the IIJA and other large federal funding sources.
Do you know if any of the IIJA funding that you have has a stipulation that can be used for staff support?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So if some federal funding allow administrative funding to be used to pay for staff that is administering whatever the project is that you've been awarded, is that something that's possible through some of the IIJA funding that CMAP's receiving, or no?
There are fund sources, as you said, that do allow 10%. I think 10% is the maximum, kind of off the top for administrative costs. This region has never done that. Is it something we could explore? For sure. I think, the main sources where that happens are STP, CMAC, those types of sources. And if we use that to staff CMAP, that's just less projects on the ground on those regional programs. So I think that, as long as we can balance our needs, I don't think that there's a desire to go that route, but it is certainly a tool in our toolbox if we need to go there.
Okay, any other questions? Last call? Okay. We will move on to the next item, item 5.01. Do any members of the committee wish to provide an update on their UWP? Oh, oh my gosh. Oh, I skipped right over it. I'm so sorry. Be patient, guys. First time. Okay. Next, we will hear an update on CMAP from the development of the 2025 to 2029 UWP competitive program. Kama.
Thank you. I'm like, I prepared a bunch of slides. You're just going to skip me? Okay, so next we'll walk through the competitive program proposals, staff recommendation, and then talk next steps for this new program. So as detailed in the packet memo, 4 projects were submitted for competitive funding consideration. I'm a little bit sad to say that no requests were received for FY28 and 29, although I do understand, we've had this discussion going into this, that thinking that far ahead is not part of our normal process yet. I am happy to see, though, that we have 2 multi-year project requests, and as we've already alluded to, we're actually going to have a 3rd multi-year project in the program. So let's talk a little bit about each individual project. First is CTA's project, that is to provide CTA's funding contribution to the formation of a project management office for the I-290 Blue Line Corridor project. The full description's in the packet memo. The schedule here shows that procurement activities, which is in the form of coordination on the scope, the RFP and structure of this joint project, are actually currently underway. And while the schedule here matches the funding request for FY25, the overall schedule does extend into FY27. So likewise, the budget here on the slide reflects that request for all of the funding up front. But as we'll talk about later, staff is proposing shifting that a little bit. Next is Metro's targeted station ridership count project that proposes collecting counts at about 30 high ridership stations throughout the system using mobile phone counting sensors and cameras on the platforms. This is kind of a new and innovative way to do this counting. The project is proposed to begin work in January of 2025 and continue through January of 2026, with the bulk of the costs occurring in that first fiscal year. Metro's Origin and Destination Survey project, which is requested to be conducted from February of 26 through February of 27, will add data points and build out trend lines from prior surveys going back to 2002. The bulk of the costs will be for the actual survey in the first year, with second year costs for processing and summarizing the data. And last but not least, DuPage County is requesting funding for the public engagement and existing conditions portion of their bicycle and pedestrian plan work. This plan will complement the recently completed trails plan. While, as I understand it, the plan will not make recommendations for the municipal network, engagement and existing conditions work will include municipalities within DuPage County. Procurement for the overall plan work has started and should be complete by July, when work will begin and continue through May of 2025. So CMAP staff applied the new methodology to the applications that resulted in these scores. Not surprisingly, the I-290 Blue Line PMO scored highest because it is a large regional multimodal collaboration between CTA, CMAP, and IDOT. The 2 Metro projects are more data focused, with the targeted count program proposing that new technology that could be applied to future projects across the region. Finally, the DuPage Bike Ped Plan also scored well, though it is more locally focused. All projects do advance our strategic direction, address federal planning factors, and can influence statewide planning efforts. All of the projects also meet the requirements of increasing safe and accessible transportation. So the use of that 2.5% of our funding is met by all of these projects. Based on the scoring, CMAP staff does recommend funding all requests with one change from what was requested. That change is to split the CTA PMO funding across fiscal years 25 and 26. This change is recommended in part to fit the available funding for FY25 after accommodating the core program, and then also to reflect that it's unlikely that all 750,000 would be spent within FY25. CMAP also has 500,000 for this project in our budget. So the 500 in our budget plus the 250 for CTA. If there was another 500,000, we think that that would probably be a little too much to spend within the one fiscal year. So this recommendation does commit us to a little over $1 million in FY26 and a little over 240,000 in FY27. Going forward, based on our recommended commitments from this first stab at multi-year programming, we need to think about, with the $1 million budgeted for competitive in FY26, we may need to scale back our core requests in 26, as we already discussed. We also probably need to look to add to the FY27 program during the next call for projects, as well as filling out fiscal years 28 really through 31. CMAP also needs to fill that gap in utilizing the 2.5% funding to increase safe and accessible transportation options. This really isn't a major issue with the STAR program and the ADA planning that we're doing fit into that category fine. And then over the next year, we probably need to, build up our data acquisition plan. So acquiring data for the region was something that we talked about a lot with the methodology development, and nobody requested data purchases in this round, and that's okay. But I think that as CMAP's data science program kind of gets on its feet over the next year, talking about how to fit that regional data acquisition into all of this is going to be part of the conversation. So next steps for the competitive program, CMAP will post this for public comment through next Friday, January 26th. And then the UWP committee will consider recommending approval on February 7th, for transportation committee consideration on March 1st, for MPO policy committee final approval on March 14th. And then the contract development and execution of those contracts from April to June would be the next step, with projects kicking off in July. And so are there questions, comments before we release for public comment?
Okay, it doesn't look like there are any, so
Sorry.
I am
slow.
like, I'm
I
looking
knew you were
around
blind
and then
spot.
you're in my blind spot, yes.
I just have
Heather.
a quick question about the CTA project. Maybe Christine, you can just answer this. For the Blue Line, the PMO funding, did you initially request all the funding in FY25 and it was split between FY25 and 26, or was that the original request? I'm just looking at the dates and they don't add up to me.
So we did request initially the full 750,000 for fiscal year 25, and then, as Kama was alluding to, we worked with CMAP to, figure out what was a more realistic spend plan for next year, and came up with the split that's reflected in the material now.
Okay, so that was just based on, it wasn't based on funding availability, it was based on when the funding would actually be spent.
Yep, Scott.
So, Cam, I do appreciate CMAP's ability to fund all of these projects that applied. I know there's probably a lot of agencies that didn't apply, though, that are looking to maybe apply next time. Do you have a sense of sort of what the demand is for the competitive program next time around? Or I'm just kind of surprised Pace didn't put a project application in. I know David has talked about wanting projects funded. So just talking about what do we expect next time around?
It would be pure speculation, but I think that having gone through, seeing a cycle, even those that didn't apply in this cycle, I think being able to see some applications, see how those scored, you know, how, you know, I can't say how it played out because the scoring ended up being kind of irrelevant in this case when we were able to recommend them all. But yeah, I would expect, I don't know, if I were gonna guess, I'd say at least double the applications. I would hope for even more than that. But again, this, you know, wrapping our heads around thinking about these planning work 5 years in the future is not an easy thing to do. We were on a very compressed schedule this time, so I think that there were folks, Pace being one of them perhaps, that maybe had project ideas but just couldn't get them together in time. And so as we get onto a more regular, more spread out schedule, I would hope that we get more applications.
Anyone else?
I just have a quick clarification about the minimum funding for the competitive program, because what it looked like from the slides is that you took all the requests for core, subtracted that from what was available, and that's what was available for the competitive program. But it seemed like from the policy that should have been a minimum of $1 million. And so in my head, that should be taken off what's available from the top and then go to see what's available for the core program. It seems like that's not what was done. So I'm just wondering how that's actually going to work moving forward to guarantee that $1 million every year.
So it was a little bit of a give and take this year, right? I mean, you have to look at them both together. Certainly, you know, the first thing you do is look at the mark, take the $1 million off and see where we're at with the core. Okay, we want to try and accommodate as much of the core as we can because those are core activities. So, you know, where is their give and take is really what it was. We were able to make the math work this year, but it's, you know, that's why kind of the slide in the core that had the green box and the 2 yellow boxes, you know, I was talking about core, so I put the core in the top corner, but easily the yellow boxes should have been the first thing, and they were the first thing that we looked at. And then we started trying to balance them both, so. But yeah, it's our commitment to set aside that $1 million first.
Okay. Because it seems like that's not what happened this year, was the commitment of the $1 million. It was, what do we have left over after all the core?
No, the conversation really did not go that way. It was, we want to try and fund it all because we think we have enough to fund it all if we make some adjustments.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Kama. We will now move on to the next item of 5.01 because we're so excited to hear, do any members of the committee have an update that they want to provide on UWP related projects?
Yeah, I can provide a quick update for Metro. I'm Jack Malik. Again, we're very thankful that the committee allowed us to repurpose the funding from our proposed downtown connection study to the sustainability plan. We're really happy to announce actually a week from today, we're going to have our initial kickoff meeting with our consultant, Arcadis, to get the groundwork started for the sustainability plan. And I believe, yep, that is the entire update. So we will be kicking that off next week. So thank you very much again.
Give a quick update, specifically pertaining to our 2 projects of CBD multimodal, as well as, excuse me, having a brain fart. It was, well, CBD multimodal, we are in the final, we're just launching the project. We're able to get through kind of the bureaucratic process of setting up, accessing the funds, you know, all that fun stuff, you know, and coincidentally, I'm the project manager for that project as well. And we had our initial kickoff meeting. We're coordinating with our several consultants to kind of map out the traffic count datas that we have all throughout CDOT to consolidate them and make them kind of consistent and coherent with each other to also set up for future practices as well. So it took a little bit to get it up and running, but I'm very excited that it happened.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you for both of you sharing that information. We're going to move on to 6.0. Any other business? Do any of you have any other business to bring before the committee? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. Staff did not receive any written public comment prior to today's meeting. And starting with in-person attendees, I have 0 comment cards. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to address the committee? Okay. Do we have anyone online who would like to address the committee?
No one online.
Wow, no one is very talkative today. Okay. Is there anyone that I missed? I'm gonna guess no. Okay. So seeing and hearing no other comments, we can go ahead and get ready to adjourn. Before I accept that motion, I want to remind you that if you haven't already signed in on the sign-in sheet right outside the door, that you needed to do that before you leave. And I really appreciate your guys' patience with me on my first time chairing this meeting. It's been really fun. With no other business in front of the committee, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Jack Malik, Petra.
May I have a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is now adjourned at 1:37 p.m.